What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA. We are here, of course, to talk about UFC 282, the last pay-per-view of the year from the UFC. It's been a fantastic year, some ups and some downs, but we've got a few, obviously, fights tonight in Vegas, not in the Apex, of course. I think we're in the T-Mobile Arena, of course. And, it's the last pay-per-view of the year. We've got one more next week, and then we're off for 3 weeks, over the holiday season and over the new year. But let's have a look at what's happening tonight. Of course, originally this was meant to be Yuri Prohaska versus Glover Teixeira 2, a rematch of the Fight of the Year contender, where obviously Yuri beat Glover Teixeira by submission in round 5 earlier this year and picked up the belt. But of course he picked up an injury that was going to, keep him out for a year, 12, 14 months. He's had his surgery, which spell accounts seem to have gone well. But, he had to put out the fight and relinquish the belt on his terms by the sounds of it, which seems, to align with his personality and his sort of a warrior-like sort of persona and values that he holds with him. And of course, that made Glover Teixeira, got the call to say, hey, do you want to fight Magomed Ankalaev on 3 weeks' notice, 4 weeks' notice, if that? And respectfully, he said no. And I think with Ankalaev, I think that's a wise decision now. Of course, there's pros and cons to it. Obviously, the business decision is you're not fighting on this card now, so you lose that show money, you lose the opportunity to fight for the belt and retain the title you lost earlier this year. Of course, Magomed Ankalaev is a entirely different entity to what Yuri Prohaska would have been, presented. Glover Teixeira, Yuri Prohaska's shared the cage with Glover already, so Glover already had that sort of data and that information and that insight as to what to improve and what to do next to try and get that belt back. Whereas Ankalaev is a fresh matchup. He's a fresh opposition. He's a fresh game plan. And you can't take him, lightly. You can't have that, stepping in on 2-3 weeks notice with someone like Ankalaev because it just finish you. And, Glover Teixeira recognises that he's not getting any younger. Obviously, he's had a fantastic later part of his career where he became champion, of course, and has done some fantastic work. But he doesn't want to be, maybe throwing away his last opportunity. I think from his standpoint, probably from his team standpoint, it's we'll wait this one out and get for the next one. Hopefully we'll still be as sharp and as ready for that one when it comes around. But let's not go in there half cooked against someone and lose that title shot and then definitely lose the future of fighting for the title again. And maybe walking out, out the door with a loss to Magomed Ankalaev. Now, of course, he probably asked, okay, what about Jan Blachowicz? I've already beat Jan Blachowicz before for the belt, so let me fight him. And obviously, Jan Blachowicz didn't get a call up for the title. Of course, Magomed Ankalaev on a slightly better run than him at the moment. Obviously, his last loss was against Paul Craig, so he isn't 9-0 since that last performance, since that last loss, and he's been absolutely phenomenal in that run. Obviously, Jan Blachowicz, albeit is the former champion, he lost to Glover Teixeira, obviously last year, and then he beat Rakic, although that was by leg injury, because obviously Rakic's knee blew out. So there was more evidence and more sort of a reasonable shout, a logical shout to give Ankalaev the next shot. So I can see why Teixeira made that decision not to go ahead with the fight and decide to wait for another opportunity another day. And that brings us to tonight. Obviously, Blachowicz versus Ankalaev was originally scheduled to be the co-main event. Obviously, over 3 rounds, no title on the line. It's now 5 rounds. And how is that going to, indicate how the fight goes? Is that going to have any difference? So, albeit they would have had their game plans and their ideas and what they want to do in the fight mapped out over 3 rounds. Of course, they've got to add another 10 minutes to that, if that will even be necessary in the ideas of their game plans. Of course, I'd expect both of them to be ready for 25 minutes. And of course, both of them said yes to 25 minutes. So that would align to that they're ready to fight for 5 rounds. Obviously, Jan Blachowicz has been there before. He's fought for the belt 4 times now, in fact. This will be, 3 times previously. Obviously, Dominic Reyes fought for the vacant title there, which he does tonight, and it becomes the first, becomes the first fighter to win 2 vacant belts in UFC history. Obviously, he beat Ezra Sanya, lost to Glover Teixeira, and obviously Rakic was a 5-round main event without his belt. So he's had that pressure on him. He's had that experience of going 5 rounds. He's had the experience of being the main event, having the pressure on him, having the media on him. Whereas Magomed Ankalaev has had some pressure on him, but he's not necessarily been the main event. I think he was the main event against Thiago Santos, if I remember correctly, and maybe even Nikita Krylov. But he's always been on these pay-per-view cards, which is good for him, good experience for him. But he's been in 3-round fights, so this is the big step up for him. Of course, his last performance was that knockout against Anthony Smith, who broke his leg in that fight, or maybe his foot. He definitely had an injury in that fight. Nonetheless, Magomed Ankalaev got his hand raised, and he's been on an absolute tear. He did go on a 3-decision run prior to that against Santos, Ozdemir, and Krylov. Of course, Ozdemir and Santos both previously title contenders, and actually Anthony Smith too. So 3 title contenders, 1 against DC and 2 against, of course, John Jones. And both of these two have significantly strong CVs and resumes. I think Ankalaev is slightly a favourite because we've seen him be maybe more devastating, more resilient. Whereas Jan Blachowicz can, he went on that fantastic run. He's a little bit older, of course, than Ankalaev, but he's also got the ability to not turn up on the night, perhaps, or maybe not show his best foot on fight nights. But again, Jan Blachowicz has been on the stage before. He's fought for a vacant title before. He looked fantastic against Dominic Reyes. Now that might have been the downfall of Dominic Reyes, that performance. But certainly Jan took a lot from that. He took a lot from the Israel Adesanya performance as well. Took away Adesanya's in MMA. And of course, the Glover Teixeira performance wasn't fantastic. It wasn't the most spectacular performance from him. And maybe that was a sign of him maybe being over the hill himself. But he came back against Jan. Or maybe just not, just into that pressure of being a champion maybe so well. Especially after fighting a superstar like Adesanya and getting that little bit of extra shine perhaps. That could definitely be something there. But I like Jan Blachowicz. I like what he does. I like what how he is and his persona. He's a very funny character, and he's a guy you want to get behind and support. But Ankalaev seems like the real deal in this division. He was someone who's been creeping up those rankings. Since that loss to Paul Craig, he's been doing his work, grinding. And he's always been someone that you've had a target on and saying, this is a future champion. And I think tonight he realises that goal and realises his potential as a UFC light heavyweight champion. But let's have a look at the tape, of course. 19-9. I think this is why Jan Blachowicz is so respected, because he has had those losses. He has had that Charles Oliveira sort of route, the Bisping route, maybe the Darren Till route, who is also fighting tonight. But he has had those losses, come back, and of course, put those wrongs to rights, and has lifted UFC gold. And he does go on these huge streaks, like a 4-fight win streak in 2017 to 2018, then the 5-fight win streak in this run up to losing the belt. So he has the ability to put it together. The last time he lost 2 on the bounce was back in 2015 when he lost to Jimmy Manuel and Corey Anderson. So he does turn it around quite quickly and put those rights to wrongs. And I think, Magomed Ankalaev, of course, 18-1. That's sole loss to Paul Craig, who's fighting Johnny Walker in that first pay-per-view of the new year. But of course, 3-inch reach advantage there for Jan Blachowicz. But let's not forget, Ankalaev is 9 years younger than Jan Blachowicz. So he's got, he's just coming into, if not just entered his peak as an athlete and as a professional. And I think he's just going to be too much tonight. I do think the change into 10 or change into 5 rounds has a little bit of a, maybe not a psychological impact on them, but of course their pace, and they're going to have to be ready to go 5 rounds and maybe tamper down the pace that they originally was expected to go with 3 rounds over a longer duration, and that changed their game plans a little bit. I think Ankalaev, with his nature of wrestling and his nature of the striking that he possesses, the head kicks, I think he has a little bit too much for Jan Blachowicz as an all-round package. And I think that'll benefit him over 5 rounds, whereas Jan Blachowicz will almost have to be perfect. Now, if he pulls out something like he did against Israel Adesanya, that's a different story altogether. But did Jan Blachowicz be able to do that because Israel Adesanya was, 10, 15 pounds lighter than him on the night? Maybe even 20 pounds lighter than him on the night? Or, was it just, right fight, right time? Because we know how good Israel Adesanya is. And, Jan Blachowicz was great on the night. But he did have to use those last 2 rounds to take him down. If he could do something like that against Ankalaev, then fantastic. But I think Ankalaev, we know Ankalaev's got better grappling, better jiu-jitsu, and better wrestling than Israel Adesanya has, and he's got the size on his advantage also that Adesanya didn't have on the night. But yeah, I think Ankalaev gets the win. He did bad things to Ivan Cutelaba twice. Of course, the first one had some controversy with the stoppage, but I put out on Cutelaba, and he's playing possum, and he's been in fantastic form coming into this. Of course, he's fought the right guys. He fought good competition. That's as Jan Blachowicz. It's a really tough fight to look at. And it would have been. I know losing the main event made this card on paper not so attractive because obviously there was originally, a fight of the year contender on there being run back. I thought there was maybe a second title on this card, but I don't believe there was. But nonetheless, it's a good card on paper, some good names. It's maybe not. Of course, we had the 281 with, Poirier Chan. We had Adesanya on there. We had Zhang Weili on there. Of course, it would be Carlos Barza. And of course, we've had 3 title fights on a couple cards recently this year. So it doesn't quite hold up in comparison to that. But it's a good card nonetheless. But I'm going to go with Magomed Ankalaev to get the job done within 3 rounds. I think he finishes him inside 3 rounds. And it's going to be guaranteed and new. But I think we see Ankalaev get his hand raised. And potentially, he could be king of this division for a while. And obviously, Yuri Pascal is going to come back. I'd imagine they'd grant, all dependent on the fight, of course, itself. So if it does go 5 rounds and it is a war, then there might be call for a rematch. But I'd imagine on all accounts that Glover Teixeira has been told he's next in line. Maybe in March, of course, there's 2 cards in March. Obviously, the one in London towards the back end of March. But there's going to be a card at the start of March. Maybe you got April as well, where John Jones might be returning. By all reports. But yes, it's a good main event, good fight, a likeable fight between 2 likeable characters, and that moves on nicely to co-main event with which there's a somewhat of a less likeable character, a very Marmite character, and that's of course Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett, of course, making not only his pay-per-view debut, but his co-main debut on the pay-per-view also, and it shows you what the UFC see in him and how he's transitions into the UFC so quickly. He's only been there 14, 15 months. He made his debut, June, July last year in the Apex. And he's been on an absolute tear up in there. And of course, he's got the deal with Barstool. He's managed by obviously Graham Boylan, Cage Warriors president, of course. And he's being very well managed and very well looked after. He's clearly got smart people around him. And that's no disrespect. That's more than anything on that, because they're looking after their fighter and looking after their representative very well. And he is someone who, one day you like him and the next day you absolutely hate him, because some things he, like for what example he does with Baby Lee and some of the charity stuff he does, shows himself as a very nice, respectful guy. And then there's other things maybe similar to what happened this week with certain comments on podcasts, etc., that turn you against it. And I think he is a very outlandish character who speaks his mind, whether that's right or wrong. He speaks his mind nonetheless, and he stays true to his. And I think that's such a respectable part of him that is, and something that sort of is liked and drawn to by fans. That he stays who he is and doesn't apologize for anything. But that comes with its pressures and downfalls, especially as you got the food chain in the UFC, and you got the notability and the notoriety, and comes with that pressure and somewhat responsibility. To your community, to your audience, to your employers, the UFC, to say and act responsibly. But of course, we've seen it with Colby Covington, we've seen it with Conor McGregor, we've seen it with the likes of Khamzat Chimaev, Israel Adesanya. And when they grow, they come under fire for things they say, and rightfully so. They're not politicians or people of great magnitude where we should be looking into their actions and their words too much, I believe. I certainly look at them more for their sporting attributes. But of course, when you have an audience and a community that there is a responsibility with that. But let's focus on the fight. And of course, Jared Gordon, not Jared Cannonier. That would be an outrageous fight. Jared Gordon has certainly been someone who's been through his own troubles, been through his own pressures, with his abuse history, and thankfully he's come out the other side of that. And he's using that experience and showcasing to his audience what is possible, and he's doing it fantastically. And it's a really good fight. 19-3 against 19-5. Of course, I hate Twitter for this, but Paddy Pimblett, when he gets a new opponent at the moment, this opponent's going to knock him out. This opponent's going to finish him, and the opponents prior to that are not UFC worthy, not UFC caliber, have been handpicked for Paddy Pimblett. And one that's very disrespectful to Paddy Pimblett, because Paddy Pimblett is a great fighter, former Cage Warriors champion, and since he come to the UFC, he's got 3 finishes in 3 fights, 2 submissions, and 1 knockout, of course, in his debut against Luigi Vendramini. And I think it's disrespectful to those, especially the likes of Jordan Levitt. To say he's not UFC caliber is very insulting to him. So it's a backhanded. It's an insult to Paddy Pimblett, and it's also an insult to the fighter he shared the cage with. And if Jared Gordon gets beat tonight, I'm sure Jared Gordon would then be included into that sort of caliber as, he's not good enough for the UFC, or the UFC just handpicked him for Paddy Pimblett to help Paddy grow. Sean O'Malley's coming to this sort of level of criticism. Conor had it when he grew. I'm sure Ian Gary will, have that sort of method of analysis with whichever opponent he gets in there with. It's very disrespectful in my opinion, but it is a fantastic fight. It's a good test of Paddy Pimblett. Jared Gordon, of course, currently on a let's see what run he is on. Of course, 19-5. He's on a 1-fight win streak. Of course, he's lost most recently to Grant Dawson, who's a ranked competitor. So we know the level of competitors he's been up there against. He's lost to Charles Oliveira, Rakim Silva, and Diego Ferreira prior to that within the UFC. So it just shows you the level of competition he's been in there with. And, former champion in Oliveira, Diego Ferreira, and Grant Dawson are both in top 15. I think Diego Ferreira was top 10 at one point in the lightweight division. So he's definitely been in there with the higher caliber opponents. So it is a fantastic test of Paddy Pimblett. And to have a look at the tape, 19-3 against 19-5, 1 inch height advantage, but the big 5 inch reach advantage there for Paddy Pimblett. And of course, a 7-year age advantage in his favour, of course, 7 years younger. Again, not quite coming into his prime, and he's still got 3 years to go into his prime. So a loss tonight wouldn't be the worst thing for Paddy Pimblett. He'll be able to grow back from that and develop from that. It'd be a good experience tonight for him to see if it goes to 15 minutes or if he gets the job done quickly. He'll want to get the job done quickly. Obviously, his jiu-jitsu is fantastic to watch. If they've seen some of the stuff that he's done at Cage Warriors days, of course, the 2 submissions most recently in the UFC, he's put some good work together. And obviously, we know what Jared Gordon could do. Jared Gordon, is a very notable fighter and worthy of this co-main position, and to be sharing the cage with him. Both of them have been very respectful this week, which has been interesting because obviously Paddy Pimblett is a bit of a mental warfare artist, especially against like Ilya Topuria. Lots of words exchanged at the press conference and over the social media. He doesn't bite his tongue, does he, Paddy Pimblett, as we've already mentioned. But these two have been very respectful towards each other. There's a lot of competitive rivalry, and once that cage door closes, it's going to be a fantastic fight. It'd be nice to see Paddy Pimblett go to 15 minutes actually, and see what test he is put up against and how he weathers those storms. But it'd also be nice to see him get a finish just from the UK's perspective. Also, but I like the way they've not thrown him in the deep end yet, because it would be very easy for them to give him a Dan Hooker or give him a Tony Ferguson perhaps, or give him a Conor McGregor when Conor returns, and that was a debate for another day, and a fight I'd actually be interested in seeing, for better or worse, in Paddy Pimblett's case, because I don't know where Paddy Pimblett's ceiling is. I think he could be a contender. I don't know if he's going to be a title challenger. Again, he's only 27 years of age, but I think he has the ability to get to the top 15. I just don't know how far into that top 15 he can get. And obviously, him and Conor could be the biggest stars of the sport once Conor returns in June, July, whenever. Paddy Pimblett versus Conor McGregor at the Allegiant Stadium. I've just been watching BT Sport guys, or at T-Mobile. It's going to do numbers. You got Scousers versus the Irish. It does incredible numbers content wise. With the fight, where would Conor be at? Where would Paddy be at that point? It's a topic for discussion certainly, but in my opinion, I'm gonna go with the Paddy win. I don't know if that's me talking to Twitter or me talking on behalf of Twitter, or seeing him get kicked all the time. Sometimes it is warranted, but from a sporting perspective, he gets kicked a lot. And I don't want to see that. I kind of want to see Paddy win tonight. And maybe get a performance of the night bonus. But yes, good fight altogether. Good co-main event. Santiago Ponzinibbio takes on Alex Morono. Of course, Ponzinibbio was originally scheduled up until early this week, I believe, if not last week. Was meant to fight Robbie Lawler, which would have been a fantastic fight. Robbie Lawler, of course, former UFC welterweight champion. Ponzinibbio in his own right is a very tough competitor, tough fighter, 28-6. Unfortunately, in that 3-year period, we had a lot of injuries and was unable to compete. And since then, he's 1-3 with a decision win against Magomed Ankalaev. But they are 2 split decision losses against Jeff Neal and Mikael Pereira. So obviously, unlike the Jingliang Li knockout, he's been within the fight and within a judge's scorecard of getting the win. And on another night, it could be 3-0 or on a 3-fight win streak going into tonight. Whereas Alex Morono, 22-7. Now, let's not forget this is a 180 catch bout because of the proximity to the fight week in which this fight got made. But he's on a 4-fight win streak. Obviously, beat Cowboy Cerrone, kicking off this 4-fight win streak. Dennis Sawada, Mickey Gill, and Matt Semelsberg. So he's got some good names on there. And the win tonight would be fantastic for him. Of course, he got lost to Anthony Pettis and Chaos Williams. But again, he's got some good names and some good wins under his resume. And a win tonight against Ponzinibbio as a former top 10 welterweight would be fantastic for him. Of course, he's not on the younger side. Well, actually, he's 32 years of age, so he's still got a lot of miles in the tank to go. Of course. But Ponzinibbio would want to get the win, but whoever wins tonight will be a win or 2 away. Maybe a Rafael dos Anjos next, or either one of those 2. But they'll be a win or 2 away from the top 15, I'd imagine. Of course, Darren Till returns tonight. The Gorilla returns after what has been a turbulent, really 12 to 18 months, particularly since the Brunson fight. Of course, he had that torn ACL going into that fight. We didn't see the best of him, and he's had a lot of fight cancellations in the past 2 years. Of course, Robert Whittaker, Hermanson, Vittori Brunson, and Jack Manson also for July was cancelled for whatnot, various injuries, etc. The Derek Brunson loss was damaging because, of course, he is a top 5, top 6 middleweight, or should be a top 5, top 6 middleweight, with the skill set he's got and the star power that he possesses. But he didn't look good in that fight. Now, obviously, that was in the Apex. We know the injuries after the fight. And obviously, those aren't excuses. Derek Brunson was the better man on the night. But he's gone away. He's not jumped in there too quickly. I think sometimes, and it's natural, isn't it, for humans, and certainly for fighters, the ego gets the better of them. And they jump into fights too quickly, trying to get that loss off their record, get that ego back, get that sort of confidence back with a win. I think Dan Hooker's suffered from that recently. And they just jump in there too quickly. I think Tony Ferguson's trying to itch for that win again. Maybe it jumps into too quickly, but takes the wrong, zigs when he should have zagged, and ends up with another loss in the record. But for this camp, Darren Till went off to Thailand. He's been away from his family, been away from his children, and he's bunkered down with Tiger Muay Thai. I mean, training with absolute killers by all accounts, and it's seemingly coming into fight week because you see the difference in one his physicality and his mentality going into tonight. He looked fantastic. He made under championship weight at 184.5. Whereas there's been talk about his weight maybe, and his professionalism with that, albeit he's not missed weight too much. I don't think, maybe once or twice on the scales. I think Stephen Thompson off the top of my head maybe, but you can see there's a change, maybe a maturity in Darren Till going out into Thailand, working with these killers that we don't know, which we aren't aware of yet, living that life of a fighter or the trainer, living and breathing fighting. I think he's matured him. He is only 29 years of age, so he's still got a lot of his career ahead of him. And he's been training with Brendan Loughnane. He's just going to win a PFL featherweight title in PFL, $1 million. And Brendan Loughnane has that work rate that you need and you desire to become world champion. And I'm sure training with Brendan Loughnane and living with Brendan Loughnane and being around Brendan Loughnane has helped Darren Till phenomenally. If you watch his BT Sport interview, one of the things that both Loughnane and Till were discussing was, if you ask a fighter, what is the highest percentage you need in a fight? Is it mentality or physicality? Everyone will say mentality, but how much mentality training are you doing? And Darren Till was stumped by that. And of course, working all day in the gym, training, session by session. I think a lot of fighters, and most fighters would say, you need to be in the gym every day, working as hard as you can. And maybe that's a little bit of doubt, maybe that's a little bit of fear, maybe that's, trying to get that confidence, trying to get that ego going, especially when you have had a few losses under your belt recently. The mentality side would be, I need to work harder, I need to do this better, I need to do that. Whereas really, maybe he's overtrained in the past, or maybe where he's overworked, or been too distracted. He's had none of those distractions in Thailand. But he is up against a very credible talent in Dricus du Plessis, who's a former KSW champion, I believe, a former EFC champion also, which is very interesting because, of course, I believe that's the same organisation that Jake Hadley won his title from. And of course, he went with Cage Warriors and done the same thing. But, he's looked fantastic against Marcos Perez, finished Chandler Giles, and then, of course, with Brad Tavares, he had a little bit of a back and forth war back at UFC 276. I remember this fight quite well because I was in a pub with my good friend Quoto de Bar. We was going to watch MMA, the Four Nations tournament in Liverpool, and we was in a pub. We were singing some Irish songs, and they had the UFC on, and Brad Tavares and du Plessis went to war, and du Plessis came out with the win on the night, and deservedly so. And he is right there on the tip of that top 10. Of course, Dan Till is top 10, and it's a really good test. It's a really good matchup because one, it's a good battle of striking credibility. It's not like he's coming up against maybe a Gastelum, maybe, or a Brunson who's going to try and wrestle him and try and get him down and grit and sort of brutalize Darren Till. Of course, du Plessis has that mentality to finish him, but it's going to be more of a technical battle, similar to like a Robert Whittaker, similar to like a maybe a Jorge Masvidal. Albeit obviously du Plessis is a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit more technical with the striking than Masvidal. But it's really those sort of fights rather than a Gastelum, rather than a Brunson. And that might work in the favour of Till, especially if this is a Till that's coming to the fight with probably the best shape of his career, probably the best mindset of his career. And, by all accounts and what I've seen of him, he looks like he's ready to step in and go toward Darren Till. But obviously, if du Plessis lands and rocks, we don't know. Maybe we see the Darren Till unravel, maybe, who's been one before. We're not quite sure. But let's have a look at the tape. 18-1 against 17-2. Obviously, 1 inch height advantage there for du Plessis, an inch reach advantage also for him. And both of these are, similar age ranges. Both of these are not yet in their prime, but they're certainly knocking on the door of the top 10 in the middleweight division, especially du Plessis. If he wins tonight, it's a big performance for him. This is a fantastic fight to be happening at this point in their career. It's a shame there's not more on the line, but there's certainly a lot of jeopardy for Darren Till if he loses. He loses, top 10 status, and there's real question marks. Maybe a move back to 170. I don't know if that's possible for him because he looked very lean. But if he's making 184.5, again, it's a big jump to 15 pounds. To lose an extra 15 pounds. But who knows if he can get that in order? Maybe it's possible. But obviously with his good friend Hamzat Chimaev down there, I don't think he would want to go down to 170. And of course, Leon is the champ. Of course, the Brits would like to see Till versus Edwards. We should have had that fight a couple of years ago. But, there's enough in place there for Darren Till not need to go at 170. It's unfortunate for Till that Adesanya is no longer the champion, because obviously Adesanya was running through the middleweight division, and a win tonight could have seen Darren Till be at least one win away from a title shot. With of course Adesanya having less competitors and less fresh faces, and Till versus Adesanya would be a very good spectacle in terms of build up, and probably even on in the cage as well. It'd be fight that would be fun to see. But unfortunately, with obviously now Pereira, it's opened the field back up to those that lost to Adesanya. It's opened the field back up to Whittaker and Cannonier and all those Martin Vettori, Paulo Costa, etc. So unfortunately, Dan Till's just dropped down the fold a little bit. He's going to have to get 2 or 3 wins now. He's going to have to beat Sean Strickland, the Jack Hermans, and maybe Nasruddin Imavov. Also, he's climbing his way up there. Derek Brunson, maybe a Paulo Costa, etc. He's going to get 2 or 3 wins if he wins tonight. Whereas I think if Adesanya has still been champion, he's probably only 1 win away. But that's, you can't go off that. And maybe Adesanya, if he gets the rematch against Pereira, he goes and wins that rematch. We don't know. But it's a very interesting one. I am going to go with Darren Till to get the victory. Only by the skin of his teeth, or the skin of my teeth in my prediction, I'd say it's not an easy fight to predict. It's a good call for fight of the night. It's a good call for it to go the distance, I think. And I think Darren Till gets his hand raised. I think we see a reborn Darren Till tonight. But again, if Duplessis gets the win, it just shows you how good Duplessis is. And we have seen Darren Till get knocked out. We have seen Darren Till get not manhandled, but controlled in the cage quite convincingly, and that confidence can be drained out of him. So yes, it's tough to see and tough to predict, but I'm going to back the Brit and go Darren Till to get the win by unanimous decision and start rebuilding that career and maybe pushing on a title shot within the next 2 years, perhaps. It'd be nice to see. We've got Bryce Mitchell against Ilia Topuria, of course, 2 undefeated prospects. Bryce Mitchell, obviously Thug Nasty, is on a fantastic run at the moment. A run of decisions against Edson Barboza, Andre Fili, and Charles Rosa. Of course, he's only had 1 finish since joining the UFC. He beat Tyler Diamond, who also Brendan Loughnane beat, of course. That's a little bit of crossover there. He got a submission against Bobby Moffett, and then he submitted Matt Sayles with that twister, of course. But he does go the distance a lot. Expect this one to go the distance also. But Ilia Topuria, we know the power he possesses. We know how dangerous he is, especially UK fans. We saw it in Jai Herbert's performance. Jai Herbert had a good first round, but obviously got knocked out in a very vicious style against Ilia Topuria, who obviously kept him at 12-0. Obviously, we know that Ryan Hall beat Damon Jackson, Yusuf Salal. It's coming over from Bray. These had 3 finishes in a row. So if you're a betting man, you're going to bet on Ilia Topuria to get the win via finish within maybe 2 rounds. But also Bryce Mitchell, we know what he can do. He knows he's very tough. Again, he's been in there with the likes of Edson Barboza, so he's not going to be phased or too bothered by what Topuria brings. But obviously, Edson Barboza is towards the end of this career, whereas Topuria is still coming up, but not even touched the middle or prime of this career. He's still got 5-6 years before he hits his peak. And he's putting together a fantastic record and a fantastic resume at 12-0. Now, the question is for Topuria, is his mind been on Paddy Pimblett this week? Because, of course, they have had back and forth. Of course, handstand Thazboy, that whole thing back in Vegas last year, of course. And obviously, these 2 have crossed paths again this week. And Topuria has been very vocal to Paddy. And maybe that's taken his guard off a little bit of what Bryce Mitchell brings. Bryce Mitchell is a competitor in his own nature, and again could be fighting for a title with Alex Volkanovski still champion within 12 months, because he's going to need fresh blood also. Of course, we're looking at Arnold Allen. Obviously, we've got the interim title between Emmett and Rodriguez, but if Bryce Mitchell, well, whoever wins tonight, you're looking at Mosar Idloev maybe, who obviously Bryce was supposed to fight in November. Then obviously you got the likes of Brian Ortega still there. You still got Captain Caters there. Also, Caters injured, so we don't know when he's going to be back. It's a really fun featherweight division to be in, but I'm worried about Topuria having his sights on Paddy Pimblett a little bit too much for my liking. But we shall see once that cage door closes. I'm sure it's all down to business. But again, someone's over has got to go, and it's a fantastic fight to open up the main card. Jay Perrin against Raul Rosas Jr. Rosas Jr., former IMAF or youth IMAF world champion. He didn't even go to the seniors. He got straight called up straight to the UFC. Made his made his name really, or notoriety, excelled when he beat Mando Gutierrez on the Contender Series earlier this year in September. He looked fantastic. For a 17-year-old kid, there's a lot of talk going into this, and sort of concerned that the UFC picked him up a little bit too soon, a little bit too young. He's 17 years of age. Let him develop. Don't throw him into the spotlight. Don't give him that pressure just yet. Let him go and grow up a little bit first, and maybe revisit him at 22, 23. But he's clearly talented because he was all over Gutierrez, had him in all sorts of positions and submission attempts and whatnot, and showed why the UFC have been looking at him and why he's been on their radar. Now, do I agree that he should have got a contract? Yes. However, do I think he should have got a developmental contract first? Yes. I think he should have gone to maybe an LFA or CFFC and got 2-3 wins under his belt. Maybe come back, revisit him at 21, 22. But of course, we've seen the success that Mokaev has had. We've seen a few, Corey McKenna comes to mind, Macy Barber comes to mind, are very young competitors, or young in MMA terms. Most don't fight for a title, and they're exceptionally good until like 28, 29. But these have been in there and doing very well. And Raul Rosas Jr., at 18 years of age, just recently turned 18, will have that John Jones record in sight, as Mokaev does also. And it's a good... I can see where the UFC are coming from, because obviously if they let him go, someone else pick him up, or if they put him on a developmental contract and he goes to LFA and he loses, they lose that value. So maybe it's better for them to protect him and almost help him shape his career and see where he can go under their roof. But he's up against Jay Perrin tonight, of course, who's 10-6. But I like what Raul Rosas has done. Maybe it's a little bit too soon, but we're going to find out. Everyone thought the Contender Series was a little bit too much too soon. But this kid seems to have a good head on his shoulders. And, it'd be nice to see him get to 7-0. But, of course, making his debut on a pay-per-view is very interesting. Ian Gary made his debut on a pay-per-view, of course, not so long ago. This time last year, in fact. So, they reserved that sort of treatment and that responsibility for very special athletes. So it'd be interesting to see what we see from Raul Rosas Jr. tonight. Obviously, Jairzinho Rozenstruik against Chris Daukaus. This is the big one in the heavyweight division. Both of them coming off of quite rough times. Obviously, Rozenstruik, since fighting Francis Ngannou, is 2-3. Back-to-back losses against Curtis Blaydes and Alexander Volkov. Did beat Ogasaki and JDS, but of course lost a decision against Shogun, which by all accounts that wasn't the most technical fight, I remember. Although they are two fantastic kickboxers, so you can see why it didn't turn out into maybe the war that we was expecting. Chris Daukaus 12-5, had a fantastic rise, as this heavyweight division is quite thin. Until you get to the top 5, top 6, it's quite if you get the right opponents, it's quite quick to grow and develop into a top 10 competitor. But of course, we come off the back of 2 losses, Derek Lewis and Curtis Blaydes, which of course, at the time, at least Derek Lewis was top 5 and Curtis Blaydes is still top 3, top 4. And probably a win away from a title shot, perhaps. But both of these two need a win tonight to really, let the people know that they're still there and about. Obviously, you've got Pavlovich there, you've got Taito Ivasa, you've got Tom Aspinall who's due to come back. And, the loser tonight is going to be not in trouble, but they're going to be going into 2023 as almost the forgotten man. Of course, Rozenstruik at 34, he's not getting younger. Obviously, Daukaus is 33 years of age himself. We know heavyweights mature and hit their prime a little later in life, at 37, 38 maybe. So they still got time on their side. I still think Rozenstruik, the worst decision he made was calling out Ngannou, because that has sent his career somewhat into a spiral. And it's difficult as well, because the Overeem fight, he only had 4 seconds left on the clock when he knocked Overeem out. But he was losing that fight very handedly. It would have been a 50-45, if not a 49-46 perhaps, to Overeem. So maybe it was a bit more off than he could chew in his first run. And he's never really got that back. Maybe the Ngannou knockout left him a little bit tentative, but you can see JDS literally straight after. We don't know. We won't find out. Or we probably won't know. But yeah, big fight for both of those. As it is for Edmund Shabazian against Dalcha Lungambula. Of course, Edmund Shabazian, similar to Raul Rosas Jr., similar to Magomed, etc. Specifically, Rosas Jr. came in very young. He's only 25 years of age. is the golden boy Edmund Shabazian. Was obviously at the time under the tutelage of Ronda Rousey's gym, but he's had a rough time. Of course, fantastic rise, and then of course he came into Derek Brunson, Jack Hermanson, and Imavov. It's 0-3 against those. Now, of course, we know Brunson and Hermanson are top competitors. Imavov is also a top competitor, but he's not a step below, but he's a win away from preaching where Brunson and Hermanson are. Definitely Brunson, but there are big losses. Pardon me, he has to be careful because he is only 25 years of age. They rushed him a little bit, similar to, this is where the litmus test goes wrong. Because obviously we've seen Sean O'Malley, we've seen Paddy Pimblett, we see Mokaev somewhat, although actually no, not Mokaev, I think Mokaev out of there. But you don't want to rush these fighters too quickly. And what they done was give them 3 monsters back to back very quickly without much return. And Lingambula is definitely no easy contest either. So it's a tough one for Edmund Shabazian. It shows you where the UFC and MMA is at. Because if it was boxing, he'd be up against someone with a negative record to get him back in. Although he probably wouldn't have had 3 losses, still be on his way up, fighting negative records. It just shows you where the strength of the UFC is at, and strength of MMA is at. But it's a big fight for Shabazian. Also a big fight for Lingambula as well, because he's also on a 3-fight loss streak against Cody Brundage, Marc-Andre Barriot, and Pinale Soriano most recently. 2 finishes as well. Of course, so Shabazian should be favourite going into this one, just because his losses have been against more experienced competitors, more higher ranked competitors. But of course, he's also got a 10-year age advantage on his side over Lingambula as well. So maybe Shabazian will see the best of him, but yeah, it's a difficult position to be in, because if he loses again, did the UFC cut him? Does he get sent away to maybe a PFL or Bellator? Go and rebuild yourself, and maybe revisit you in 5 years' time. That sort of position for Edmund Shabazian at the moment. Chris Curtis against Jacqueline Buckley. Buckley, a fantastic fight. We know what Chris Curtis and Buckley can do. Both able to finish fights. Buckley, of course, knockout of the year 2 years ago now against Impa Kasangane. Pardon me if I butchered that name. Billy Carantillo on tonight against Alexander Hernandez. That's a fantastic fight for the prelims at 145. And you got Eric Silva versus TJ Brown also. We've just had Cameron Simon versus Stephen Kozlo. Simon getting the win in round 3 via KO. So yes, I'm going to leave it there, guys, because the fights have started. I'm going with, of course, Magomed Ankalaev to get the win, Paddy Pimblett to get the win. I'm going to go with Ponzinibbio to get the win against Morono, and then I'm going to go with Darren Till and Bryce and Ilia Topuria. I'm going to go with those to get the win. So yes, let us know your predictions for the fights down below. Make sure to drop a follow. Make sure to we're on the way to 2,500 on Facebook, so let's try and hit that target before the end of the year. A couple of weeks left, of course. Enjoy the fights. We're all back to recap Bellator, which happened last night also, and some of the last week's stuff that we missed. Of course, we'll catch up on Monday as well. So yes, as I said, go follow us across socials at CageChat MMA across Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, etc. We're on everything these days. But yes, I'll see you guys on the next video.